Oh, this is scheduled to go in 2 minutes live, but I'm just going to begin it now. We have our pupils' whites of eyes. We have two eyes. We have quality aspects in nature, the same as the other species' bodies, distinctly but non-distinctly too, and simultaneously, but per what is further hyper simultaneous, where nature shows us to appreciate a value that is further hyper simultaneous at least. But see, we have a quality of fact should be nature, where the formal identity, the identities, voices of the sciences individually grouped and together they have been affected about by where and how. Our countries were forced by nature distinctly from how forced by a breaching method that designed homes that were built before America's founders were born. And I learned that in notes at Central Connecticut State University, they had laws that hurt anyone and those people around them, and worse, if they were found out to have been speaking about building homes outside of those contexts, monitored by international conversations and bodies, and they had and still have roles recorded with that predicate acts with facts method, and the difference of that or the nature itself used as not just as I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers themselves, anyone honest with reason proper, we could discern all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts themselves and the exceptions tied to them since semi-ancient times, and we know this. In other words, what we could observe also is how they kept replaced the difference between the communications of our founders behind James Madison and his plan, for example, and that's where American history begins and ends, except for where it's hyper additional, where it's increasingly people call it negative because the counter is, in other words, it's hyper additional where, in other words, other things, others ourselves are being and have been communicated for our founders. And that's right where nature itself is communicating other answers. How they got away with this, it's recorded too. At country, see suits and ties, counters, and exceptions. It is not by accident that people would pretend it's debatable. I'm not saying people don't believe it, but people that would pretend it's debatable, that it's legitimate to say that a tea tax was the cause of the American Revolution. And so we have just because something is published and just because the campuses were a certain type of victim / hyper victim from off them, sustained on and off them hyper additional criminal foreign influences / hyper criminal foreign influences. I'm not an identity of the law. Everybody's an identity of the law, but in other words, I'm not a form of police form, and a lot of people aren't, and the good police are going to be hurt by this. The difference, same thing. I'm not a judge. The courts originally still they were involved with all kinds of predicate acts with facts methods, because per roles with use / s of both natures and our founders' communications at each age of factory nature. This method is multi-front against each age of factory nature. And it's playing how nature, we are systems A through Z with our names uses as systems tactical ulterior from its communications uses of differences. Therefore, names A through Z. Another identity, therefore names too. We are shown simultaneous. The simultaneous comes with the hyper simultaneous. We are shown relativity. See, the theory of relativity is used to measure and maintain shock and awe. Responses maintained and responses relative where replaced are the communications of our founders. And the motivations for it are also, the difference of that is used also. And it's not just America. That's why the Russia's founders were there before America's, for example. But the suburbs look just like they do in America. And the suburbs were designed tactically to nature. And while that identity, names, differences, racket worse than war crimes was entrenched, sickly, distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies. And then America's founders were born. And then they used James Madison's plan, and they counter-extorted. Because everyone was tortured, extorted, in fact, cheap in nature, enslaved, therefore, physically. There's a Senator, Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy, please do what's right, because there are people involved with various natures and methods of roles with various natures of weapons, including guns, crimes with kids. And the difference between that, because these are also ones with drugs and medicines, crimes with the kids, and predicate acts with facts. The same foreign and domestic doctors forging names, fake conversations with people, uses of all natures of investigations, investigators originally and still for purposes maintained by hyper-foreign, because these are also names that have stayed on off campuses where the predicate acts there and the names all grouped. In other words, there's a Joshua Stryker that is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by little kids from other areas that came to my street to make confessions tied to their have roles increasingly with falsified police reports and wire crimes with Wethersfield police and Hartford courts and the Britain courts and their family members and people associated with them with other natures of organized crime. And your roles with use/S of all sides in criminal and civil cases used, and the courts themselves at the same time used to fake things as people involved with their cousins too, with the World Trade Center attack, forced Saudis to collusions with them. And the difference of like the Saudis attackers forced America to collusions with the attackers too, because both sides were used. They're using the differences of the countries originally and still. Like, for example, relative to, there are a whole bunch of people with the name Leahy involved with a Rick Cianfaglione, a Timothy O'Brien, and a Ray Colo, and an Andrew O'Brien, with different police departments in Newington and Rocky Hill. And they know my name. I don't even know other names. In other words, and with the courts switching and forging names and planting evidences on all sides of my house and all sides of those people's houses. Also with state police families, interstates, with the ones involved. And these are people with New York City and the court next to it and all sides of that case in the World Trade Center attack context involved with the attack. And my Saudi friend wasn't with me, but the cousin of the one with the wire crimes. And they're trying to pretend it's between us and them personally. And then they're making like there was a gunshot with a pellet gun as one of the people involved with other natures of guns involved. Right before then, like the day after President Trump was shot. Reportedly, it made it sound like it's fake. Too, I'm just want to make that note because especially if it was real, because the news has names next to them where they've been showing the president's fake information. WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, and WTNH, which is right next to the FBI in New Haven, Connecticut. How are you? So in other words, the world is about to blow up, and everyone's like, it's blowing up. People are dying, and they have these new ages of weapons. And originally, and still, our American history and descriptions of it is hostage. Increasingly, people with the military, they change the names. In other words, there's more than one. In other words, and there's something to do with. In other words, on the sides of on the sides of ground distinctions and at those places because they don't even know. Like retired Weathersfield police chiefs have roles further. I recorded them roles having force to the principal child abuser and the differences between parents and there were uses consciously of the difference of the word adult and kid as value because they're mixing these are differences rackets, the same ones involved with KKK, black themed and Latino themed falsified police reports with made roles, fabricated phone conversations, changing what's actually recorded over phones. In the news, they had the news pretend fake conversations with me as a kid. And the kids who did go to the police station and have conversations with them or have them at their house, or you know how they did that. I seen someone went to the police station and gave an affidavit about how they, in other words, and that process, that was a Chris Walters. He was one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed from years before that. In other words, Timothy and Andrew O'Brien and a Ray Colo. They have roles with the intelligence community with Hartford Police, Rocky Hill Police, Newington Police, Weathersfield Police, and 2 retired police chiefs at least. And involved with the same house / S, involved with more World Trade Center predicate acts, also with WFSB and with intelligence next to them, and the difference of that, involved with wire crime acts and whole methods of them with them. All sides of criminal and civil cases in Connecticut and the courts themselves and in the Ninth Circuit and their cousins, who they say were their cousins, the people with the name Scalora. Also increasingly, that's why I didn't say anything to the hairdresser. There's a Scalora has been pretending to know me as one of the ones between the campuses involved with, even if it's legitimate, what they call legitimate with, pretending to be part of or actually part of, the criminal enterprises they claim, like Los Solitos and people next to the body dumping spots where they have people with the name Violet involved interstates with prosecutions in the past through time. The state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices have roles with a whole bunch of people that are cousins with different last names that are shared cousins per them of a DeMoro and a Colo, who kids and adults from my grammar school increasingly tied to body dumping spots, confessed, demonstrated, recorded, confirmed. They have roles with them with that, and since before, Ray Clo came to my school in 4th grade, and I never hardly ever saw him there one time. It was, and he punched me first, and I punched him, and he fell down, and that was years after, like when I was first there. The second year I was there. Someone told me to go around the corner. The second I went around the corner, I got punched in the ear by a kid I didn't know. That's a Rick Ciampaglione. He confessed it was a part of a Leahy family. More than one people with the name Brendan Leahy. A whole bunch of men and women that work at the Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living, where they have mental health care sides of hospitals. And they have judges and prosecutors and their family members who will put fake conversations with people with foreign and domestic medical, and they have all the types of drugs and things like that with the unmarked police forms. These are also people with the Cub Scouts. There's a Sal Civiello involved with the wire crime acts and methods and predicate acts with facts with people who are speaking on crimes. Then because they're collusion, and then we're showing how they need to hide their actually reported natures. Black pupils. We're going to discern criminal insidiousness / hypercriminal insidious. We don't have to be lawyers. See, Judge Napolitano is not following mandated law, for example, with the interbranch that have been refusing to identify themselves and refusing to get on paper, and they made fake exceptions. They have roles with former director of the FBI, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed at West Hartford locations before the World Trade Center attack, planting evidences with people on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the news, the leaders of the kids are the leaders of the kids, abused to abuse the other kids. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joseph Dennis. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him. I never saw Joseph Dennis on a campus in my life. He's one of the ones involved. A whole bunch of people tied to a former Mayor Gold and his daughter, Debbie Gold. And there's a Lee Gold. I never met him. and she may try to make fake, except she put fake things in the database. Uh, they do a trick to make it look like it's you, and even when it is your fault too. But in other words, they're doing that with predicate acts. In other words, and with gun crimes, these are people involved with gun threats, knife threats that aren't police, and there's also the ones that are, and they're trying to pretend that's how they're leaking too, because they're planting evidences. So the people on the sides of Central Connecticut State University, with the name Gill, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have roles with federal evidences crimes in Weathersfield, with names involved with wire crimes and falsified police reports, child abuses, all kinds of sexual and medical crimes against kids, with as their roles of wire crimes with the doctors, faking conversations and ties with kids, and uses of their own. They have their own daughter involved on Facebook with untimely deaths and murders and body dumping spot U/S that were timed intercities with the confessions they evoked and the names from other areas on my street to make it look like I was tied to the ones next in my area involved with it. Like there's a David Smith, a Jamie Smith, and their mother are involved. One of the ones involved with the threats to hurt me, credible, poison, and the guns. They have wire crime acts and methods. These are police phones, families involved with the neighbors of the people. In other words, I don't the Cololo, the name Cololo, they brought up with the police phone to bring up more names. Bob Chase brought up the name Phil Cololo. So then Phil Cololo is increasingly involved with predicate acts on my street. There's, in other words, and he was riding a bike, swerving after someone else rode a bike and repeated one of the names of the people they got. One of my extended family members. They've been lying to me. Now you have family members, you don't even speak to them. And they're increasingly attaching me to fake conversations with them. And they're lying about their motivations for it. So that's when they're doing this with little kids too. And I can't be a teacher until I get this taken care of. And when I caught them at Central Connecticut State University before the World Trade Center attack with former director of the FBI, and his name. There's more names we can get. Involved also with judges and prosecutors, all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions, who were planting evidences. Where and how it's recorded, part of the answer too, where nature answers our questions, like where and how you guys left out how we have black people's whites of eyes being the same color eyes we have at the same time. And while we have different color eyes, and while the other species bodies have eyes, that we have the same distinctly, but also non-distinctly, and simultaneously per what is also further hyper simultaneously. Scientific values reception here. See, but value systems A through Z have been tactically ulterior than nature's. So we have to appreciate the hyper relativity, because we have to appreciate relativity. And we have to appreciate where and how this preaching method measures and maintains from off all natures of campuses. Role self-value we use /S of theory that can't be defended and forward discerned what nature and what our founders communicated for us. It can't afford that quality of fact-driven nature to exist, because it would be able to look around and back with records and things like that and see these collusions. Way worse than what they've been putting little kids and adults in jail for, and even when they didn't do things. And when they did do things, even like murders, they're using that to torture them, pretending to correct them or whatever. But they're keeping out what's actually recorded. They have rolls with the names next to those body dummy spots with the serial killer, who's increasingly involved with the same names that planted evidence on my street, like a Rob Rodriguez, involved with the untimely deaths, plural, that were brought up at the same time. And I didn't respond. And then he was on Facebook. So you have these little rat holes. And then they call people rats. They're trying to pretend I was part of their little group. That's what they did with Fred Grisey came. I didn't even know who he was. And he's involved with modern pastry. And he abused that girl with a John Mayano, with doctors too, at the campuses. and people further involved with a Murphy. There's a Mr. Murphy, and there's involved also with a girl who's in the news who said that a little girl said that Lance Cuddy is involved with it. Now I didn't respond to her. I don't even know. Michelle Sandquist was her name. But now she's with the school. She's one of the ones further with some sexual and medical offenders of the kids. And a police chief, Cintron, his daughter, Jessica Cintron, Reno Mazzucato, he tried to make a fake exception of knowing me. He has people increasingly involved with whiting forensics and state police, interstates, and intercities, who have roles with the World Trade Center attack, and forced the Saudis to collusions with them. Their roles with shopping centers and malls, and refusing to identify themselves properly. The law dictates things that we have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes. In other words, you're supposed to get them to identify themselves. They're pulling people before courts and lying about why. They're putting fake things in databases. This is before those arrests. Those arrests were tied, and I'm not even in court now. But those arrests were tied to what I was asking people to help me with before that, because those courts and the FBI director and other countries, and even a Kuwaiti general, will go to confess, demonstrate, confirm things to me that I didn't even explain to them, because these are also confessions of the people on my street about that spot involved with it. And increasingly, it's people on all sides of the Weathersfield Community Center involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of racketeering of mixed natures at medical campuses, New Britain, Hartford. Same ones. The same ones involved with wire crime, identity theft, fraud, slander. You should fear God, the military too. I apply. Get the heck on paper. Get on paper with the interbranch. Let's not make me beg and others. Judge Napolitano, let's do it right. Get Connecticut interbranch on paper. These are people out of the corrections offices and out of the state judicial branch offices that have been planting evidence on all sides of my house and all sides of other kids' houses. Who's that guy with the red pickup truck? Let's go. I want a response for the rest of the principal child defender's confessions too. In other words, and what's this? He brought in the name Mike Levine, and this is a Michael Bean. And a Bean was also brought in a whole bunch of probate court judges tied to the ones involved with this too. Those are sick people involved with sick things at elderly homes. That's unacceptable for human standards. Look at the suburbs were designed tactically to nature to cause the only means to cause positive value nature, progression, need things from other people. More self-valued roles with ourselves against ourselves. At A through Z, that's why the suburbs look like they do in Russia too, and they were built before our founders were born. Houses on the same scale in nature. And nature itself shows the worms are not even in the soil anymore for all kinds of reasons. But we're taking away the food of the soil. We mow it. Not worms. All the fish have long been dead. But in other words, basically, and all the worms, they walk into the water when it's raining, when the bugs are not on top of the surface. They're filling a niche. The bugs are not as easy to get by the birds in the rain, but now they're in the puddles. They're walking up. See, nature shows us, nature works with positive value, nature progressions, acts in nature. When we pay attention to it, it's that identity of hyperrelativity. And when we pay attention honestly, what we all agree about is we want to pay attention to like where theory is used. And like we're just saying, because this is the context, where we're trying to be polite, respect the title. Then don't use it to mean what it doesn't, and change what exceptions and exception nature. Because the whole purpose of exception nature, the way we know, is to also appreciate how, for example, we have the same quality aspects of nature as the other species bodies, even the insects. And we didn't invent it, and they didn't invent it, except they didn't invent it either. In other words, There's a hyper additional. Nature shows the order of the mind needs to be able to appreciate the hyper simultaneous. We don't have to agree on the name of it, but we need a scientific name for it. And there are proofs that ancient pantheism appreciated that name as Allah. And the Trinity comes with how we discern. It is grouped 3 ways distinctly from how it is grouped 5 ways. And then they appreciated the value of the difference of that is also increasingly value. And then and you can use this to discern. It's showing us with every subject individually, and then further grouped, and then further simultaneously, its identity. Even though we could discern it only to an extent, it comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that equally, only increasing. And how we could discern it. It's not just projecting to us that way. Many pray. So in other words, we can make a great charity, a hyper charity. You can give more than charities give. In other words, and make hyper positives out of negatives, but we can't do it if the whole species. In other words, nature shows us too. Names A through Z of the species could discern a hyper criminal foreign influences a little bit better than the rest of them, a certain way. That's how, in other words, it's because we are the temporary / lasting possession of its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. And it's showing us individually grouped and together, including as countries, any grouping, anything we could make up, even fake things. It is inseparable from the finite, from the grouped, and from the simultaneous this way. This is why not just the human species body of individual bodies has all group differences, plural, being demonstrated to that there is a hyper difference / difference. And this is the Trinity, because we can only discern the complete identity of all space / existence, like the same way a part of your body could discern your complete identity. They have a semi-nature relationship to it. They have everyone's body has a semi-nature relationship to their complete body, to their complete identity, not just their bodies. Because everything is showing it, everything, even if it's made up, its identity is a little bit greater than, a little bit more finite than, and it is active relativity. It is a little / a lot. It's an identity of simultaneous, hyper simultaneous / simultaneous. Because with the invisible but still discernible, this is what English and the other languages were revealed to teach before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions raw, even if in the defenses of themselves, which there are proofs that it was, at A through Z, defenses of their names themselves, not just wrongly, but wrongly not realizing that was the agenda of what they were trying to counter syntactically. And that's manifest as relativity to why and how the natures of things are manifest that way. So the people that want to have a debate with the people about Sandy Hook and the guns, but they have collusions with people, in other words, with those things, and way worse. So predicate acts with facts. We're going to have to appreciate this. And the identity theft, fraud, slander method, it's manifest that way. That's why they won't get on paper and they switch and forge names and sequences, all sides of criminal civil cases and the courts, intercities and interstates, before the World Trade Center attack in it and since. I told them, Peter Mike Pence. So, in other words, get them on paper. I told them before they start putting the pence in the thing, too. And then that capital. See, these are people on the Connecticut State Capitol. And they have a what's his name? Robert Cheverry involved with this, with East Hartford names and Hartford and people next to the Capitol on off of it, involved with identity theft, fraud, slander of nature's method. You fear God. God and plot.